Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson. Joshua Butler is a local author. He's written a book called The Skeletons in God's Closet, and we had a chance to talk to him about exactly what is that all about anyway. We have a very interesting guest today because I've never heard of a trailer that's used to help sell a book. But we're going to have that today when we're talking to Josh Butler, the pastor of Imago Dei, just up the road from us in Portland. Good day. Good to have you here. This is an interesting thing. You've written this book and then you put out a trailer, right?
Yes, sir. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't have to get too much more complicated. The book is called The Skeletons in God's Closet, and we are going to talk about what those skeletons are, and I think this might explain it. Let's roll the book's trailer.
Many of us fear hell is a skeleton in God's closet, an underground torture chamber that looks like this. Well, that's not quite right. Okay, well, you probably have this picture that right now I live here on earth. And one day I'll die, and God will either send me up to heaven or down to hell. The problem is, this isn't how the Bible actually talks about it. In the Bible, the story goes like this. Heaven and earth are created as good by God. However, when we rebel, they're then torn apart by the destructive power of sin, death, and hell. But God is good, and he's on this mission to reconcile heaven and earth, to bring back together what hell has torn apart. Jesus' word for hell is Gehenna. It's a valley outside the city of Jerusalem, and it was a place known for child sacrifice. People would go outside the city, light the flames, and murder their children in this really distorted religious practice. And it's interesting to note, the flames of Gehenna were lit by human hands, and the people killing their kids were going back into the city to sleep at night. So for the prophets, Gehenna became the symbol for idolatry and injustice, and what's wrong in Jerusalem and in the world as a whole. But the hope of the prophets was that God was going to return one day as the good king to redeem Jerusalem and kick out all the rebellious, destructive powers outside his city. The reason hell's destructive power is kicked outside the city is because it stands opposed to the good and redemptive things God wants to do inside the city. So we see that hell's location is not underground, it's outside the city. And its purpose is not torture, it's protection. But is it a chamber? The irony is that we want hell. We want life without God, and we choose destructive things all the time that are tearing our world apart. Take sex trafficking, for example. Most of us want that out of God's world. I spent a summer overseas working against it and was disgusted by the exploitation of kids for sex. But as I read my Bible, I realized Jesus wants sex trafficking out of his world too, only he takes it a lot more seriously than I do. I want to bring back the problem with sex trafficking. Jesus wants to dig out the root of things like pride, lust, rage, and greed, things we all struggle with. Luckily, Jesus' question for us is not, are you good enough to get into my city? His question is, rather, will you let me heal you? God wants to forgive. Hell's not locked from the outside. It's locked from the inside if we refuse to be healed. So, lots of people think of hell as a skeleton God's hiding, something that makes him look vindictive and vengeful, but I've actually found it to be one of God's greatest acts of mercy. I explain more on why in my book, along with looking at judgment and holy war.
The book is called The Skeletons in God's Closet, The Mercy of Hell, The Surprise of Judgment, The Hope of Holy War. Available now.
Josh, after seeing that, I think every book needs a trailer. Very well done. You know, watching this and hearing what you're saying about what you've titled the book, The Skeletons in God's Closet, reminds me that a lot of people have a misunderstanding of some of the biblical truths that we think we know about. And I'm thinking it's not just people who aren't Christians, but people who are Christians as well. Is that what you have discovered?
Definitely. I mean, I'd say these are questions that I've wrestled with in my own life, especially when I first began following Christ. And as a pastor, I'm one of the pastors here at Imago Dei in Portland, and I found so many of the folks within our church, not just in our city, but even in our church, either wrestle with this personally or they have friends or family who've walked away from these topics. And I titled the book Skeletons in God's Closet because I think often folks have a sense or this fear that God's hiding these skeletons, these tough topics, that if they were to really open up the closet doors, open up the Bible and look, the fear is that we'd find God's not good or worthy of our trust. But I think that's often I found because I think we have a caricature of what's actually happening in the biblical story. And so one of the things I want to do is give us the freedom to kind of reopen the closet doors, look at the Bible, and actually offer some paradigm shifts where I think we begin to see these topics arising because of the goodness of God rather than in spite of it or in contradiction to it, and really try to help people reclaim a greater confidence in the goodness of God.
You know, I think of that, and then you combine the aspect of people who will take things in the Old Testament and then kind of convolute them as to what they think they mean, and then they say, see, that shows God is a bad God. I mean, there just seems to be misunderstandings all the way around. Is this a big challenge that you found even within your own congregation that you're constantly having to solve, or has the book answered everybody's question at Imago Dei?
Yeah, I don't know that. I think part of the joy of following Christ is that we get to continually press in and wrestle, you know, with who God is and all. So I don't know that journey ever ends, but I do think there have been some helpful paradigm shifts for folks in kind of reclaiming that confidence in the goodness of God by realizing that there may actually be a bigger, more robust picture of what's happening in some of these stories than kind of the caricature that gets presented popularly.
You know, I think of the Apostle Paul. He talked about be ready for an answer for people who ask about the faith that lies within you. I'd have to say that that's kind of one of those constant things I have to look at. Do I have the answers that, first of all, I can answer to myself, let alone answer to somebody else? Is that what part of this book is for, is to be able to just become more biblically literate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned, for example, the violence in the Old Testament, and one of the things there I found, say, in the Canaan story, Israel's encounter with Canaan, there's often this, you know, three things I look at there. I think there's often this picture of kind of like a genocide, you know, that Israel's going in and wiping out civilians and the whole deal. And I think there's a lot more going on when we dive into the story. As an example, three things I look at. One is that the language for city, we think of a civilian population center, right? Like I go outside and there's hospitals and schools and people everywhere. But in the Old Testament, cities were more like small fortified military fortresses. And most of the folks lived in the hills and the villages up away from the cities. And so as Israel's kind of coming in and knocking out these cities, it's not like they're wiping out civilian population centers. They're taking out these military fortresses, and the primary language in the Old Testament is that of drive out, not kill off. And so it's really kind of this picture of exile and eviction. And there's a whole bunch there. I've got a couple chapters on trying to see that there's a much more robust picture than kind of the brutality that often gets depicted. But even some of the language, the war rhetoric that's used was common in the ancient world throughout the Middle East, and even in Israel in the Old Testament, where there's kind of this exaggerated trash talk, like a basketball team that wins a game and they are like, wipe the floor, then we annihilate it. You know, you hear them talking and think like, oh, the score was 120-0, you know, and you find out the score, well, it's actually 120-105. It was still a victory, but not quite as drastic as the language would lead you to believe. And similarly, you've got that kind of thing happening where Israel go, we wiped the floor with them, we annihilated it, we took care of them, took them out. And then a few chapters later, they're back strong as ever, fighting again. You know, any time that language is used within the Old Testament itself, it kind of makes clear there's this ancient war rhetoric that was common then. So trying to help resource people by taking a deeper look at what's going on in the story. All
right, since you brought up the aspect of war, we hear even these days now the Holy War, the Crusades, when Islam comes into the picture, and Christians, and what did they do, and all the rest. Your book addresses this to some degree, isn't that right?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I look at in the book is that we often think of holy war as the strong using the gods to justify their conquest of the weak. And I go, kind of in the Old Testament, what's happening is actually the opposite. It flips this picture on its head, where it's actually God arising on behalf of the weak against the tyranny of the strong, when it's kind of been going on for centuries, for far too long. So you look at Israel, and it's a nation of ragamuffin slaves on the outskirts of empire. They've been getting, you know, their tails kicked for years, and God is kind of rising up. They're depicted as the last and the least and the weakest, and God is presented as the primary one doing the fighting. You look at the battle strategies, and they're ridiculous. You know, it's like we're going to march around Jericho and blow trumpets. Like, you can imagine in, you know, World War II or so, you know, like storming the beaches of Normandy with guitars and drums or musical instruments. It would be a wipeout. And so looking at throughout the Old Testament, the narrative is one where the battle strategies are ridiculous. They don't have the weapons. They're the weakest, going up against the mightiest imperial powerhouses in the ancient world. But God's the one fighting. And I think that distinguishes it from terrorism, too, where it's not terrorists saying, we will fight for God. It's God saying, I will fight for you. And so I think terrorists get it wrong in this sense that we're going to go out and be divine intervention, but they don't actually need divine intervention. It's a different picture when God's the one rising up to be the primary one doing the fighting.
Let me just remind our viewers and listeners, Josh Butler is the author of The Skeletons in God's Closet, the book. Who was this really written for? Is it just people in the church? Do you think people outside who are trying to answer some of the questions and maybe they're seriously contemplating about the Old Testament and what they see perhaps as violent versus the love of the New Testament, what they may see as a paradox? Is it for them too, or did you really focus in on just one group?
Yeah, well, I'd say both end. But really, it's funny. One of the people I primarily wrote this for was myself 15 years ago, which can sound a bit strange. But following Christ, and immediately had friends going, well, you think I'm going to hell now, or what about God's so violent in the Old Testament, And I began to grapple with those questions pretty early on myself. And for me, part of it was looking back and saying, 15 years later, what were the things I would tell myself if I could go back then? Kind of paradigms just that have helped me. And I found that. I think it's hopefully to resource people within the church who wrestle with these questions, but also I hope it would be helpful for people outside the church who are maybe interested in Christ but held back by some of the maybe these caricatures or stereotypes of a God who doesn't actually look maybe like the robust picture of the Bible would give us.
Yeah. Well, let me take you back 15 years to the age when you were asking and answering these questions. What would you say was the most effective and the most ineffective way that people gave you answers to some of these deeper questions, and perhaps they just wanted to give you a quick answer? What advice would you have if there's somebody in the midst who is asking the same questions you had?
Definitely. Well, when it comes to someone who's trying to help someone to wrestle with questions, I'd say I was willingness to listen. One of the things that was most helpful for me were people who were willing to listen to the questions I was wrestling with, who would not be so quick to give kind of a trite, quick answer, but would ask more questions. Tell me more about this, or why does this bother you? And being able to really have a listening ear. And for the person who's on the questioning side, wrestling with questions, I would say God's big enough to handle our questions, but I would encourage people not to wrestle with them in isolation. I think within our churches, within Christian tradition, there's a whole bunch of resources to dive in. My hope with the book has just been to make some of those resources available and maybe accessible for folks who don't know that there's a bigger, more robust picture that the historic Christian tradition would offer on these topics.
All right, terrific. Well, let me mention it's Josh Butler. He's the author of the book called The Skeletons in God's Closet. Looks like a fascinating read. I want to get a copy and read it myself. Obviously, I haven't yet, but
I'll send you one.
You've piqued my interest. Thanks for being with us, Josh.
Thank you so much.
All right, coming up, did you ever think you had an invention that could help people, but I mean really help them in a significant way? We're going to talk to a guy who has done that in a way you probably had never considered. Stay tuned. We'll be talking with Kenton Lee coming up in just about 2 minutes here on The Dove.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at the Dove TV. Did you know that when you support the Dove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today. You might have said, I have a great idea for something. Or more likely, you've said, somebody came up with this great invention. Why didn't I think of that? If you're a parent, you probably have realized the kids grow out of clothes way too fast, and how could you just stop that? Well, you probably can't stop it, but you could adapt to it. What about people who are in third world countries? That's even a bigger problem because they just can't go down to Walmart and pick up a new pair of pants or a new pair of shoes and make everything all right for your growing 7-year-old. Kenton Lee is our guest today. He's an inventor of a shoe that grows. Yeah, now you got to think about that for a minute. I didn't say anything wrong. It's a shoe that grows, and he's with us. Kenton, this is a novel idea, and I think it's pretty amazing, really. Explain a little bit, why did you think that you needed to invent a growing shoe?
Well, thanks for having me on today. I love talking about it because it was just based on a really simple personal experience I had. After college, I traveled and was living in Nairobi, Kenya, at an orphanage with about 140 kids. And really, one day, a little girl next to me had shoes that were just way too small. I was shocked. I looked around. A lot of the kids had shoes that were too small. I found out they just didn't have enough money to afford new shoes and didn't have enough donations coming in to keep up with their growing feet. And I just kind of thought right then and there that day, wouldn't it be nice if there was a pair of shoes that the kids could just adjust and expand? It seemed like that would make a lot of sense for the kids that I was around at the orphanage.
Yeah, it does. Now, do you have like an engineering background?
Not at all. I just had an idea, and then that's probably why it took about 6 or 7 years for us to fully create this and make it a reality. But yeah, I just had an idea, and then was kind of just stubborn with it and tried to make it happen for for several years.
All right, let me just get into the mechanics of it a little bit. These shoes start out at like this shoe that you've devised. At what age and goes till how far?
Yeah, so I've actually got one with me right here. This is our small size. This starts about a preschool kindergarten kid. There are different sizes around the world, so I usually just use the grades as kind of an example. So a preschool kindergarten kid, and it grows 5 sizes up to about a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade kid, depending on the size of the foot. And then we have a large size that goes from that 4th, 5th grade kid up to about a 9th grader. But this shoe right here can grow 5 sizes and last 5 years and cover a child from preschool, kindergarten, up to about 3rd, 4th, 5th grade.
Wow, that's amazing. Now it's kind of like a little bit of a sandal, and it looks like the tab at the top there is what allows the feet to grow longer. Is that right? And you just adjust it there?
Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of a shoe-sandal hybrid. Right now, it definitely works best in warm weather countries. And then it grows in 3 main places. It grows here in the front in 5 different sizes, on the sides with these snaps, and then on the back with a buckle. So it grows in 3 places, and we're just really happy with the really simple design of the shoe. No mechanical parts, no gears that are going to break that the kids would have to replace. Just a really straightforward, simple, very functional shoe. Wow,
now that's amazing. Now I know the need for this is terrific. I want to get into more of that. What shoes, kids and shoes, they go through them pretty fast. What is this made out of that'll allow it to be so strong for all those years?
Yeah, great question. We were able to design it purely based on function and not on fashion at all, which allowed us just to use some great materials. The bottom is actually a compressed rubber, very similar to a tire rubber, and then the rest of the shoe is just a very high quality leather. And we really didn't cut any corners. We wanted these to last as long as possible, and so just a couple of simple, strong, sturdy materials, and coupled with our really functional design, we're just really confident in these shoes that they're going to last a long time for these kids.
Now, you said you're sending them to Nairobi at first. Is that right? Is that the first place?
That's where my first experiences were. My wife and I took about 100 prototype pairs back to Nairobi in 2012. But now we sell our shoes to churches, organizations, anybody who travels and works with kids. So right now they're actually in about a dozen countries around the world, and then we're currently sold out, but in July we have 5,000 pairs coming, and we're excited to sell those to more organizations who work with kids, and so really they could end up almost anywhere.
Wow, that's amazing. How many have you been able to distribute?
We're sold out of our first batch of 3,000 pairs. We thought that was a gigantic amount of shoes, and now we have 5,000 coming, and hopefully many, many more after this.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of ministries as well as agencies that, I don't know if you're working with government agencies or not that way, but what's the cost for these shoes?
So it depends on kind of what you want to do with them and how many you'd like to purchase. For the most part, we sell a bag of 50 shoes. We call it a duffel bag of 50 pairs of shoes that weighs under 50 pounds. So for churches going on mission trips or organizations, people that travel, really easy to check onto a plane and take it with you. So for the most part, we sell about 50 or 100 to the groups. 50 pairs of shoes is $15 a pair. 100 pairs of shoes at $12 a pair, and that's if I send the shoes to you. But we also have a way for anyone who does not travel. If you're not going to Africa or Central America anytime soon, you can still be a part of this at our website, theshoethatgrows.org, and for that we offer our lowest price, because we're not in this to make any money. We're a nonprofit organization, and so our lowest price for the shoes, for just $10, you can donate a pair of shoes to one of the partner organizations that we work with. And then when a bag of 50 is filled up, I get that bag over to the organization and they distribute it in the course of their ministry. So wow. For those who travel, there's a way to be involved. And for those who don't travel, still a way for them to be involved as well.
Let me just ask you a little bit. When you had this idea, you were going to get it going. How hard is this to get an idea? I suppose you have to get it patented. Then you have to find somebody who's going to help make it. How difficult was that journey?
Yeah, it was crazy. I basically just had this idea, thought it would make a lot of sense for the kids that I was around, but I had no design or engineering experience. I definitely had no shoe experience other than just wearing them every day. And so it really did take us several years to be able to find the right partners, the right people to be able to make this happen. But I want to give a big shout out to the shoe development company that has worked with us. They're called Proof of Concept. They're actually up in Portland, Oregon. And once we found them, they loved the idea. They totally saw what we were trying to do. And they're the ones who really helped create the shoe design. And they've been working with us every step of the way. They've really been a godsend for us. And we'd still be just a couple people with an idea at this point if we wouldn't have had this relationship with the guys from Proof of Concept. So it's been really fun to see everything kind of come together, and obviously these past few weeks our message has just been able to spread, and it's just been a really, really fun journey. Wow,
that's pretty cool. So is the shoe that was developed, was that what you had in mind, or was it quite different than what you envisioned?
It was actually a lot different. I was hoping, I remember our first conversation with our shoe guys in Portland, and I was hoping that the shoe could grow 10 sizes and last 100 years. I just had all these
why
wild,
not shoot
wild
for it?
thoughts.
Yeah,
I know, right? And so they're the ones who actually, said, here's what's possible. Here, here's what we can do. Here are the materials we can use, and the type of design we can have. So it's just been amazing working with them, and they've been able just to take us to a very realistic place that I don't think we would have gotten to without them. So it's been just an incredible relationship, and I really thank God for them almost every day.
Yeah. After your test run and you got them back, and you heard what the kids had to say about it, did you have to re-engineer it much?
Just a little bit. We had them tested out for about a year at 4 different schools around the country of Kenya, and just got some amazing feedback from the kids. They did have a couple of suggestions, and so as we started to work then with the factory, there were some just really good things for us to be able to work on and update. And even now, our first batch of 3,000, now that we have those kind of out there, we're hearing more feedback from the kids, and are going to continue to make improvements to this product. So it's something we want to keep making better and better so that it can last as long as possible and grow as much as possible and cost as little as possible. Those are kind of our 3 goals for the shoe.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So you said your organization is a nonprofit, is that right?
We are, yeah. We're called Because International, and hopefully this is just our first project. We'd like to tackle other issues and try to create more innovations that can help people, and especially help kids with just kind of practical daily life things. So we're really excited with where the Shoe That Grows is heading, and then we're excited to tackle a few more projects here pretty soon.
Sure. Any preview you can give us on what that might be?
Yeah, actually, our second project, we're calling it the Better Bed Net. So for bed nets, mosquito nets, a lot of people around the world have to use them to protect themselves from mosquitoes and malaria. And just a quick snapshot of a situation. So for many kids who live at the very, very bottom of extreme poverty, a traditional bed net just doesn't quite make sense for their lives. A traditional bed net hooks into the ceiling and then kind of drapes over a bed. But for many kids who don't sleep under a ceiling, they don't sleep in a house. They might sleep outside on the streets. Their housing is very transitional, very unstable. So a lot of times the traditional bed net doesn't make sense for them. So our design challenge is to try to create a freestanding bed net, a bed net that does not rely on being hooked into a ceiling and then draped over a bed, but one that could stand up on its own. So we have the kind of the challenge, and now we're just in the design phase, and we're excited to connect with, again, because I'm not a designer, we're excited to connect with designers, engineers, people who like to tinker and invent things. We're excited to find the right design for this product, and then kind of go through the same process, test it, create a prototype, and hopefully create an amazing innovation that can help out a lot of kids and provide them a product that makes a lot more sense for their daily lives.
Well, that sounds interesting. I know with a lot of tent designs out there, I'm sure you're looking at everything possible that would make sense that way, because it sounds like that's almost what you're talking about, doing some sort of an encompassing kind of a tent thing.
Yeah, kind of a mix between a tent thing, and then even we've had a lot of people suggest those laundry bags that kind of fold up, or the thin steel, they fold up and they can kind of pop open to put dirty clothes in. So kind of those two visuals, we're trying to kind of combine those and again, hopefully find something that just makes a lot of sense for the kids.
Who knows, you might get some ideas from NASA too. They come away with things like that.
That's right. Hey, we'll take any idea from anywhere. That's
Kenton,
right.
Good talking with you. He's the author of The Shoe That Grows, and you can find out more by going to his website, theshoethatgrows.org. Let's keep in touch. Next time you have another invention, let us know, and we'll get an update on how the shoes are doing too.
That sounds great. Thanks so much.
You bet. Kenton Lee with us. Hey, we're going to be getting an update coming up next on missions throughout the world, how they have changed, and who knows, maybe they could use some shoes that grow as well. We'll be talking with Connie and Todd Aebischer in just about 2 minutes here on The Dove.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, along with a couple guests, Connie and Ted Aebischer. They are here for a while. How long are you going to be in the area here anyway?
Actually be in North America until June 22nd.
Oh, all right. So for a little while, that's good. They're with the Nazarene Missions International, and I know that you work in media and all the rest, which I think is a fascinating thing. We've talked about how what we're doing here and how you realize that, originally it was a radio ministry, realizing the importance of video and how people are now able to get whatever video anywhere, how cell phone communications, it may not work if you go out into the wonderful forests of Oregon, but out in the Serengeti, it probably comes in just great. So I know media is so important that way. And so you're in the Asia Pacific region, is that right? Give a scope of where your operations are based out of.
Yeah, the Asia Pacific region extends basically from Australia and New Zealand in the south, north to Mongolia, picks up all of the Asia Pacific or Pacific Island nations, and moves east to the borders of India.
So it's just a small regional area,
yeah,
he said tongue-in-cheek, right? How big an area is that? Have you ever looked at that from a mileage?
Absolutely. It encompasses fully 30% of the global landmass of the world, and has 40% of the world's population, about 2.8 billion people.
Wow. Now, you're with Nazarene Church,
correct?
Is that right? And what, if you could summarize, what is the mission that you have there? What is your goal?
Well, the mission of the church as a whole is to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. I mean, that's our tagline, our mission, and really our focus. How do you do that in a region that has 8,000 unreached people groups, 2,000 languages? It's a massive endeavor. It can only be done through partnership with other Christian organizations, but that's our focus, is to be able to get out, reach the unreached people groups, reach into the cities. We have 7 cities of over 20 million in that region. We've got 4 of the 5 mega cities of the world. The city we live in, Manila, is a city of 27 million people.
And that's the big area. I mean, you're also extended out into very rural areas too.
Very rural areas.
I mean, probably only by boat, some of the places?
By boat, by airplane. In fact, I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea a year ago. We have radio ministries, about 13 radio stations which broadcast into the highlands of Papua New Guinea. On the western edge in Papua, we have 44 unreached people groups that either by geography or personal decision are in areas that are absolutely isolated, no power, no cell phone, no radio. And we were up in the highlands, and I was praying, Lord, does radio even get here? And I was talking to a friend, and we left the little hut we were staying in, and here came a young man carrying a solar-powered radio. And that was the only communications connection they had to the outside world. And so it just reaffirmed the importance of radio to beam into those very remote areas.
Okay, so you are involved, let's transition to that, into media. In what capacity do you focus that?
Absolutely. We have the largest media center for the Church of the Nazarene in Manila. I've got a team there of about 13 that works in radio broadcast, video production, new media, which is web design, mobile application. We have found that with the growth of mobile technology in Asia, we are growing at 37%. The rest of the world is growing at 12%. Recent statistics tell us that the average Asian from China, Korea, India, they are downloading 3 times the data downloads that anyone else is in the rest of the world. And so we have developed some unique strategies for using mobile data, mobile phones to be able to expand the gospel message. It's pretty incredible.
Elaborate a little bit on that. What is that you have found that connects with your particular audience you want to have?
Well, we were just in one of the most densely populated Muslim nations in the world, and we had developed a strategy of contextualizing the gospel message. So for instance, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Excellent parable, because in those cultures and religions, to take care of someone who is not part of your faith is something that is just not considered done at all. And so we went into an area, taught some college kids how to take the parable of the Good Samaritan, contextualize it into the context of the place that they were living. And so the street vendor would be one individual, and a motorcycle owner would be someone else. We taught them how to storyboard it, shoot it with their phones, edit it with their phones, and then reproduce this video that they could go up, share with someone, say, hey, look at this video I just produced.
Yeah.
Opens up a conversation piece, and then the person says, well, why would this person take care of this person? They're not of the same faith.
Starts a discussion.
And it opens up the opportunity to share the gospel of Christ. Well, God calls us to love others.
Have you put that on YouTube? Is that something we could see? The production?
It's not yet. We've done a couple pieces that the kids have produced on YouTube.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, we're putting together a training pack. I'm getting ready to take that hopefully to Thailand this summer. So.
Oh, that's cool. Now, Connie, your role in this, how do you work in this? Are you a media mogul yourself?
I am not. I am not. I am the assistant to the regional communication coordinator, which is my husband, and I also have been tasked with NMI for the region, which is Nazarene Missions International.
Oh, okay.
So I help to encourage our local churches to be actively involved in missions, and having the media center, like we just had a request from Taiwan that they wanted a video, but they needed it to be in their language.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Hey guys, can you subtitle this video for me? Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
We're done.
Well, that's cool. Now, this is really a different emphasis with missionaries as we would traditionally think of it as being. I mean, I think just what you guys are talking about shows right there how media has become such an integral part of missions, at least this aspect of it. For the region you have, do you see this as the most effective way of connecting with the people groups that you're trying to?
You know, I think of, by all means, doing whatever we can to get the gospel out. We use the Jesus film quite effectively. We use...
And that would be in what language?
That would be in
Probably
multiple languages.
Any number of languages.
That's right, multiple languages. We use print media to a limited extent nowadays because the new media, the mobile media, is so much more effective. We're very fortunate in the fact that we live at Asia Pacific Nazarene Theological Seminary, which is our major seminary for the region. We have at least 16 different language groups there, which gives us access to language assets, to subtitle, to create videos in the languages of the region. As she said, Taiwan asked for videos in their language.
Sure.
We're putting things together for as many languages as we can.
And this was already in the Philippine language, and they wanted...
It's actually in English.
It was, oh, okay.
Yeah, so we produce a lot of video for the regions of the world. We produce video for the United States. We produce video for, we're doing projects in South Africa, Russia. In fact, we did a piece here last year, our first pieces in the Russian language, and very well received.
Now, the Philippines, it's an area with a heavy Muslim population, right?
Well, actually, more Catholic.
Catholic, okay.
As you move south out of the Philippines to Malaysia and Indonesia, you start to get into the more Muslim, densely populated areas.
And the difficulty that has been had with Christianity among those people groups, do you come up with different ways of reaching them than you would, let's say, to those in Manila?
You know,
is there a different way you have to approach it?
Everywhere we are, we use a different strategy. One of the most effective strategies, and I don't want to think of it as strategy, I want to think of it as just being the tangible hands and feet of Christ. You know, it's not up to us to develop a program. God is moving and drawing people to Him. We happen to be in probably the #1 typhoon belt tropical storm. You'll remember in 2013, Super Typhoon Yolanda hit us. They said that at this time it's the strongest tropical storm ever in the history of world record keeping to hit. We went down and just were compassionate hands and feet, providing food supplies, providing building supplies, providing medical teams. We worked together with Samaritan's Purse, with Heart to Heart International, with Hands of Hope, with International Relief and Development. We went into communities that weren't Christian, where we might have a small impact from a church, and provided medical support for the whole community, provided building supplies for the whole community, provided food for the whole community. And sort of the common theme was, why are you doing this? Other organizations come in and just take care of their church or their people, but you're coming in and taking care of a whole community. That opens up the opportunity to say, because we serve a Lord who tells us to be loving and kind to everybody, regardless of race, regardless of religious belief. And it really opened up doors to share, well, what is this faith? Who is this person you believe in? So that's an incredible strategy.
No matter the changing technologies, it comes back to that same relationship.
And it comes back to the very core of, that's right, loving people for Christ.
And you're based out of Manila, is that right?
We are based out of Manila, that's right.
All right. Well, it's nice to get an update, as brief as this was, on what's going on in that area. And you'll be here for a few months, and then you'll be heading back there, I assume?
Right. We'll be in North America. We'll be speaking here on the West Coast, headed back to Idaho, and then be moving up to Canada. We've got some meetings in Canada. Giving people basically an update also of what's happening in Nepal. This has been, as you know, quite a traumatic couple days.
Yes, yeah.
And we've got some missionaries on the ground, some exciting things going on there. We've got teams headed in. One of the benefits of the church in Nazarene is our churches on the ground. We've got about 3,500 churches in that area of Nepal, India, Tibet, Bangladesh. And having people on the ground gives us an opportunity to really be able to network and get resources out well. So.
All right. Hey, thanks for being with us. Ted and Connie Aebischer, they're with the Nazarene Missions International. Thanks for being with us, and keep us up to date with what's going on.
All right. Thank you very much for having us.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about an Oregon bill that's going through the legislature that could require your parents, the parents of a person who has an abortion, to actually pay for their abortion, whether the parents wanted to or not. It's kind of an interesting law that's going through the legislature. We'll tell you all about it coming up in about 2 minutes right here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at the Dove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at the Dove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368. Welcome back to Focus Today. Well, we've been keeping you up to date with a lot of the legislative
goings-on, both in the Senate and the House in Oregon, and some of the bills take more precedence and popularity, I guess you'd say, than others. I want to talk about one that maybe you haven't really heard about. It's House Bill 2758, and it could require parents to have their health care pay for an abortion that they may or may not want to have. We're with Lois Anderson, Director of Political Operations for Oregon Right to Life. Lois, I haven't had a chance to meet you. It's nice to meet you today.
It's nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me this morning.
You bet. Now, I know that you're really watching this bill, and so I want you to tell us, HB, House Bill 2758, what does it actually state?
Well, just as a reminder, folks, if they happen to look it up, it has been amended quite a bit. So the actual form that will be voted on will be available sometime today, maybe tomorrow, as it moves through the process. So what it actually does is it says that a child who is covered by a parent's insurance plan, like most of us have, can go into a doctor. Now, we're going to talk specifically about abortion because that's our focus, but this bill is very broad and, in fact, allows any child with any health care to go through this procedure. But if a minor girl went into an abortion facility and said, I want an abortion, and then they ask her, she's covered with private insurance, she said yes, they can, she can suggest, or they can suggest, well, you know, we can have this covered without your parents knowing about it. We just need to go through this process. So they set up a process where their private insurance is covering this abortion, and then it is paid for by the by the insurance provider, and without the parents' knowledge or consent. And there's a lot of questions about this, just detail-wise, for anybody that's gone through the insurance process, exactly how it works. But we believe that the reason why this is being pushed so hard is because Planned Parenthood, being the nation's largest abortion provider, providing lots of abortions in Oregon, wants to make sure that they're getting paid with all of the changes that are happening with taxpayer-funded abortion.
Is that what you think was the purpose of the bill originally?
That's what we believe. You know, they're not going around the Capitol saying we want to be sure and be paid, and so that's why we're doing this bill. And initially, there was a lot of discussion about abuse victims. There were discussion about something called sensitive services, which they actually amended out of the bill. So it's become much more broad even than it was before. It's very concerning.
Now, we've heard a lot about sex trafficking up and down Interstate 5, and I've heard that the impact of this could be that a pimp could tell the girl that, hey, don't worry, if you're pregnant, you could have a free abortion and your parents would pay for it. Does it come down to something like that?
It could. We're very concerned about that dangerous loophole. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's a lot of coercion that goes on surrounding these issues. And we're very concerned that it would open up a very dangerous loophole. Just besides the fact of just the idea of you, a parent, wanting to be involved in their child's life and health care and having something like this happen to her without knowing about it, it's fraught with all kinds of problems, as we know, because in Oregon, of course, tragically, a teenage girl can go in and get an abortion without her parents' consent and figure out another way to pay for it. So that's why we've come to the conclusion that really the only motivation behind this is more dollars into the coffers, because this process is already tragically legal in Oregon.
How far along is this bill in possibly becoming law?
It is heading for the Oregon House, full House for a vote. I haven't heard whether it's happening today or tomorrow, so it's coming up very quickly. And then it has to go to the Senate. So we're hoping that somewhere in that process between the House and the Senate, we're anticipating that it'll probably pass the House. Normally, when bills get passed to the floor for a full vote, they already know the result. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't still call and they shouldn't still email, because we've seen some amazing things happen this session already in stopping bad legislation. So we're hopeful that this one also can be stopped.
The way this is being promoted, this bill, is it in the same way that you described it, or is that whole aspect of parents not having to be informed of an abortion that their insurance would pay for, is that just being ignored, or are they actually bringing this up in discussion?
Well, what's interesting about the way that this legislation has moved forward is there have been a tremendous amount of amendments and really no testimony or long discussion about what the ramifications of the amendments are. And so they are talking about children needing to access certain kinds of health care that they may be uncomfortable telling their parents about, and they still need this health care even without their parents' involvement, which of course is a parent of 3 teenagers and one that will be a teenager in a couple of years is extremely concerning.
Yeah. Well, I think a few years ago we wouldn't even think that a person's insurance would be charged even if they didn't know about it, and yet now this could be a possibility of this. I mean, has the insurance industry talked to you about their concerns about this as well?
They haven't talked to us. They have been involved with the committee, and they have had concerns. I think that their concerns have driven some of the amendments, but I'm not familiar with all of their concerns with the bill. They did testify, and they have been involved. I can only imagine that it seems like a mess waiting to happen for them, frankly.
You know, this is one of the bills that I can't say has really been up on the radar too much. I can't say I've seen too much about it. Has this been kind of one of these quiet bills that are just sitting there waiting to have something happen?
It has. It seems sort of boring. It's just about insurance. And there were, it was one of those bills that kept getting taken off of the schedule. So it looked like maybe things weren't moving forward. Just in the Capitol building, the people that are watching legislation, there's certain things that happen to bills that are moving forward that you know are going to move forward, and there's certain things that look like maybe the bill's being delayed for some reason. And this one was one of those. It just kind of snuck on. But our full-time lobbyist, Karen Dennis, has been on this from the beginning, has been working very, very hard, has been trying to work with the legislators on the committee to get some amendments adopted. Those amendments were not adopted. So we're at least trying to get it so that you have to be an adult child on your before you can access this process.
Yeah.
I mean, that it would take away, that it would allow parents to be involved in minors' health care, but they rejected that as well.
Now, so how young does this actually go, the way that it's the amendments are right now to it all?
There's no age suggested in the law at all.
So this could go to any age at all, up towards, I suppose, being 18. Is that it?
Well, actually, because of some of the changes that they made when they were passing Obamacare, children can be on their parents' health care up to age 26, but there's no age limit or even mention of age in this legislation, which is one of the things that's concerning about it.
Well, so you're actually saying then that a 40-year-old woman could have an abortion, and it would possibly her elderly parents would have to pay for it.
No, I think 40 would be too old. I think there's only 26.
26, so it would go up through the Obama. That's still certainly an older age than one would think.
It is, and of course, abortion at any age is taking the life of an unborn child, so that's of great concern to us. But we did feel like if at least we could try to limit it so that it was 18 and older, we would be protecting minor girls, but they rejected that.
All right, so you're saying you want people to get in touch with their senators and their representatives about House Bill 2758.
Yes.
Is there a name that they're giving it?
No, it doesn't have a moniker.
It doesn't. Okay. House Bill 2758 then. All right. Lois Anderson, thanks for being with us. She's with Oregon Right to Life. And this bill could be voted on today or tomorrow in the House, and you think it could be approved and then go on to the Senate? That's where we're at.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. We'll keep an eye on all of this. Thanks for giving us an update on that. All right, again, that's House Bill 2758. You can check that out and read it yourself with all the amendments. And thanks for joining us for Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.